I'm Heidi Vogt. I'm the Foreign Affairs Editor at Politico. Good afternoon. You know, it wasn't so many years ago that we were trying to decide if AI applications were safe to use at all. I know sometimes we forget that, but today we're dealing with artificial intelligence not as a future issue, but very much as a current one. Generative AI and autonomous systems are a key part of military strategy, the business landscape, and our daily lives. We started the conversation about AI just in the last session with Kent Walker. Now we're going to really dig into it. The questions we're weighing in real time include things like, what are the acceptable boundaries in which we have AI operate? How much do we need to know about how a system works for it to be deemed responsible? And at what point does innovation and experimentation tip over into a use of AI that's damaging to our democratic societies? We've got a great group of panelists to address this. Dominic DeMolino, the VP of Worldwide Public Sector Technology and Innovation at Amazon Web Services. That means he's in regular conversations with governments about what AI solutions they need and what those products should look like. Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, who's introduced legislation to put guardrails around the use of AI deepfakes and AI's use in elections in the US. And back on the stage, we have Admiral Samuel Paparo, the commander of US Indo-Pacific Command, which of course puts him at the forefront of questions about how the US is positioned to confront AI threats from China, or threats in general. Senator, I want to start with you. We had conversations this morning at the conference about how democracy equals security. We're coming to the end of a year where more than 50 countries held national elections, covering about half the world's population. We saw AI deepfakes and AI-powered influence campaigns employed in many of those. We saw it in the US, too. We saw robocalls and social media efforts. None of those massively disrupted the election, though. What have we learned about the dangers of AI to the democratic process? And is the risk not quite as urgent as we thought?
Well, I think it's urgent. And I think this is the perfect intersection of security and democracy. I love being in Canada, by the way. My state, of course, borders Canada. We can literally see Canada from our porch. I just am very glad that this is one of the last panels, because some of the lessons we learned from the first ones are pretty applicable to this. When you think about technology in general, zooming out from AI, it has made a major contribution to some democracies. You think about Zelensky, the day after the invasion, how he was able to go down to a street corner and with a phone was filmed saying 3 simple words to his people, "We are here." And that video went everywhere and motivated them in bright blue and yellow to continue the fight. Or you think about the use of technology for Ukraine, where I think everyone had thought they were going to be trampled over in terms of our weaponry and the things we use. But then there's another side of it. And David Brooks, the New York Times columnist, probably said it best. He said, "The people in AI seem to be experiencing radically different brain states all at once. I found it incredibly hard to write about AI," he said, "because it is literally unknowable whether this technology is leading us to heaven or hell." So we're going on the side of heaven. But if we're going to do that, we have to harness the good, which certainly with innovation coming from the state that gives you the Mayo Clinic and invented everything from the pacemaker to the Post-it note, there's huge gains we can make in healthcare and other fields. But to do this and make this work, we have to have guardrails. Kent mentioned some of the risks, and I think you all know them, the risk of trampling on innovation, because if there's no protections for intellectual property. Mike Rounds here, Republican senator, has worked in a group with Senator Schumer and Senator Young and Senator Heinrich in the US Senate to develop some rules around that. And many other things with AI. We've got the security risks that we'll talk about, scams, but then you have the risk to democracy. And as you noted, there have been examples in the US. There was a fake of fake audio of Joe Biden's voice during the New Hampshire primary, Senator Shaheen State, done by a magician and then altered, you can't make it up, telling people not to vote. That was criminally prosecuted. There was a fake video of Donald Trump hugging Fauci during that very primary on the Republican side. There was in one state in a governor's race a picture that was digitally altered. It was just a normal announcement of a candidate for governor, the person's opponent, but they put no gas stove signs in their hands and then ran it in a TV ad. I personally, since visiting with John McCain and Lindsey Graham, Ukraine, back in 2015, 2016, have been the subject of numerous social media attacks from what I believe is Russians, with a picture of John and me in a bunker with Ukrainian soldiers. And the whole thing is Amy Klobuchar is funding Nazis in Ukraine. You might think it sounds weird. It's been going on for 5 years. I can't go to a big public gathering in Minnesota without someone yelling, "You're funding Nazis in Ukraine." Didn't affect me in my election, but it's out there, and a lot of my colleagues have had similar experiences. Internationally, in Slovakia, the pro-NATO candidate was a victim of an AI-altered video in which he was claimed to have said the election was rigged. It was eventually taken down by the platforms he lost. Happened in Argentina, happened in Taiwan. So as I look at the solutions on the democracy front, I was trying to memorize this. I thought of 5 Ps. Public education, we know that matters. In the Baltics that have been dealing with Russia on this for years, it's made a difference. Getting people in place. I use the example of General Nakasone, head of our cyber command for years, he recently stepped down, or Chris Krebs, who was during the first Trump administration. You need the people in place who are going to be able to do this. You need pacts and international treaties in which countries agree to what they're going to do. You need the platforms to take responsibility and take this down. And then finally, you need to pass laws. And there have been examples of that around the world when it comes to democracy and AI. As mentioned, we have bipartisan bills that are just sitting there, and I'm very concerned. It may not have made the difference in this election, but it is just, to me, we've seen the tip of the iceberg. You have got 18 states now in the US that has at least labeled these AI ads that are more serious, not minimal examples, but more serious ones. You've got other countries doing it. And then you have countries that are actually taking down deepfakes, the most serious ones that aren't for a joke, that are not about, one proposal was made in Canada, that are actually the citizens cannot make a distinction about if it's the real candidate or not. They say democracy dies in darkness. Well, democracy also dies if citizens cannot make an actual distinction between what is fake and what is real when they're evaluating what a candidate says. So Senator Hawley and I, a conservative Republican, with Senator Susan Collins and others, Chris Coons, who's been here before, have a bill that's kind of stalled out right now to actually allow, in very specific circumstances, taking down of deepfake videos during elections, because I think it's going to be, and other forms of advertising, I think it's going to be really hard to have a democracy that functions if you can't tell if it's the person you love or the person you hate, if you can't even tell if it's them.
You know, you use that key word there, guardrails. And I'm thinking about Admiral, you know, that's a word that we think also probably in the military applications, but it's very different, the challenges. You know, we want responsible use. We also want to stay ahead of our adversaries and make sure we're nimble. How would you describe the responsible use of AI on the battlefield in the military?
I would describe it, excuse me, I describe it as, pardon me, I'm sorry.
Fine.
Maintaining human accountability over all military decisions. And I think that's absolutely critical, either on conventional use of AI or most especially any usage of AI for nuclear weapons, most especially. And I think this is absolutely a dictum. So in the 21st century, through the commoditization of propulsion, commoditization of precision strike technology, commoditization in space, everybody can see, everybody can sense, everybody can strike. And so the difference is who can do so at the fastest. And so in the AI fight will be won by who, as Paul Shara writes, can win on the 4 battlefields. Those 4 battlefields are compute, talent, data, and policy. And so critically, among those 4 battlefields, I think it's absolutely critical from a guardrail standpoint is to maintain human accountability over the usage of AI. And so we must ensure that in any case, within the laws of armed conflict, and I think that the laws of armed conflict are probably immature in the usage of AI in covering this, that commanders do not use AI tools as a crutch to make decisions about taking lives when employing these tools. And really, AI tools are really, it is only in the last 3 or 4 years where AI has made the kind of leaps where we can see, where we can really bring in the kind of data to do the mass data analytics for the kind of information on the battlefield where it can assist commanders in making these decisions. But you don't want to have a system where commanders abdicate decision-making on the battlefield or at the strategic level for warfare. And so, you know, I think it's time, and in fact, at the uppermost levels of government for conventions on AI, particularly at the strategic level on those usage and those guardrails.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned policy, I want to bring Dominic in here. You're working with governments every day on how they can use AI to be more efficient, more effective, make better decisions. But of course, as we're hearing what those rules and policies should be, it's still very much evolving. I'm wondering, you know, what are the questions you're hearing as you talk to governments, and what are you figuring out in terms of the limits that they need or want to put on?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things we see is, the first thing is, as we evolve a policy, how can we apply that policy to our use of AI? How can we ensure that when we've applied the policy that it's being complied with? How can we measure that it's being complied with? And the good news is we're working in the digital space, which means when I apply a policy, I can measure every time I feel like it's being applied and when it's being used. And so generally that's the first question, which is if we do come up with a policy, can we enforce it? Do we have tools? And the good news is working with our infrastructure, we make sure that those guardrails can be implemented on the platform. So that's usually the first question, can we implement a policy? The next question is usually, what should our policy contain? And the good news there is... They're asking you. Yeah, they ask us because they say, what are other governments doing? We get a question of what are you hearing, what are you seeing in policies? And generally this gets down to use case by use case. And a lot of times it's guiding the individual, guiding the agency, guiding the department toward policies they actually already have in place when they govern decisions made by humans or content produced by humans in their department. Oftentimes agencies already have a regulatory review framework or a decision evaluation framework that says when someone makes a decision or publishes a statement, we go through a review process to ensure it's accurate and it reflects our policies and values. So there's already a framework. And so what we then help them do is say, you've already got an existing framework. How do you adapt that framework for these tools when they're being used so that you're consistent with how you enforce those policies on what your people do? The AI should be subject to the same level of scrutiny and control and management.
Are there dangers that these clients want to address that you technically can't?
We haven't seen any yet. To be honest, what we're seeing is simple questions about evaluating if it's consistent with a set of compliance tools and regulations. It's fascinating. Oftentimes they're saying our individuals have to be subject to reviewing. They go through yearly training to say, am I compliant with our policies? And we test those individuals to say, do you understand the compliance policy and know how to apply it? And what we found is we can do that with AI. They're very consistent when we tell an AI, here's our policy, here's an attempted output. Can we tell if it complies with our policy? And in a consistent way, the AIs regularly say whether they're being compliant or not. And we can measure that. And in some ways, it's even more effective than some of the things we do to make sure our folks are compliant.
So we're sort of addressing two things here, right? We have the threats of AI from the outside and how we're implementing AI ourselves. I want to go back to you, Admiral, because, you know, what we're thinking about often when we're trying to figure out, well, how do we use AI, is what are our adversaries bringing at us? What do you think is the biggest threat from China in terms of what they are doing now and what they're developing?
Well, I think they're trying to develop the same thing that we're trying to develop, which is tools to be able to outpace our own decision making. This is the coin of the realm, which is to be able to see, understand, decide, act, and to be able to bring resources to bear, to be able to bring weapons to bear in such a way that you're acting most efficiently against your enemy's center of gravity in such a way that you can most efficiently, effectively, and most quickly achieve your objectives at the lowest cost that you possibly can. And so this could also include decryption. It can include this can include entering into your enemy's networks. I mean, every single combat function, every single operational function that you're doing can be aided by AI. You think about every single human operation that you're going to be able to do. You know, think of it the way that Danny Kahneman writes about it in Thinking Fast and Slow. Every single operation that you've ever had to do on a piece of graph paper is something that you could seek an AI application for. And if you've got the right data set and you've got the right amount of compute, you can potentially build an AI tool to do it. And so in order to negate against that, you have to protect against those data sets. And this is the very reason why our government is protecting against export controls against 2 to 9 nanometer processors, is why you have to protect against compute. I talked about the 4 battlefields, about compute and about data, and this is why our government is so intent on protecting our highest end technology, and why we're so intent against protecting against data. It's because this is the coin of the realm in protecting decision superiority. And while we're on the topic, it's not all just about hurting. AI applications can also be used from military applications in humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, in being able to map disaster relief modes, in being able to just be more effective in every single thing that we do. And so, you know, I think ultimately these tools are effective, and it's a matter of data, compute, policy, and being effective in those things.
With the data access that the Chinese government has, do you feel like we're behind on that?
We live in an open society, you know, and that has inherent advantages to us. We live in an environment of free press. All of us, you know, all of the information ever printed, ever known in the world is available to you in the palm of your hand. And if you live in the People's Republic of China, everything that you can look at is controlled by your government. And that's just a fact. And so it happens that the People's Republic of China also has access to all of the data that you have. Senator Klobuchar, you mentioned Senator Warner just a moment ago. I think I'll defer to you on this question because you spoke so profoundly at the table the other day the other day to that. Inherently, the PRC has a data advantage on us, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
The international competition on this and to make sure we use this to our advantage is huge. We know that. But I think at the same time, and these bills that I just mentioned, you know, you might think platforms versus us. It is platforms versus me on some things, like antitrust, I'll admit it. But not as much on some of these rules on AI. The bills I mentioned are supported by a number of the platforms because they want to actually have rules in place. When Elon Musk says he wants some rules in place, that's interesting, okay? Maybe we should listen. I think the fact that we haven't moved yet and we want to be ahead of the game, part of this is being ahead of the game with the technology, which we have been, but they can easily catch up and exceed us like that. And so we want to keep moving on that, but I truly believe if we're going to want to keep that advantage, we're going to have some rules in place. And that, I'll just mention one that's non-defense application. Thune and I passed a bill through, and who's now the majority leader in the next Congress, on at least putting the rules in place for NIST to set the standards for non-defense applications of AI. And so the more we can move on this and that the democracies of the world move on setting our standards and that we're syncing our standards, I think the better off we are. But this data and how the data is managed is going to be everything. I'm really pissed we don't have a federal privacy law in the US yet. It's a patchwork of laws, and it's time to move on that. And so these have been, people always make fun, oh, these members of Congress don't know what they're doing. Well, it might be true on some things, but they actually have learned more and more about this, and that just can't be an excuse anymore for us to just sit down and do nothing. So, you know, I am ready to start fresh. I would mention one other thing about the competition issue, that from my view, we didn't put enough rules in place on competition policy with tech in general. We have these monopoly situations. This is where Kent and I and Amazon and I may differ some. And I think we need a diversity of supply chains when it comes to AI. And that's just been sitting out there. Our laws in the US are very restrictive to enforce the competition laws that we have. And I think that has got to be part of this too. It is certainly not to hold us back, but it's just to get some rules of the road in place. And let's not make the same mistake again on AI that we have in the past on tech.
And two other points on data, which is we strive every day to protect the DoD information network, and we are under constant attack. And the second one, and I think Heidi Grant will appreciate this, is that the defense industrial base is under constant attack, and we cannot urge the defense industrial base enough to protect their networks because they're just so absolutely critical to the defense and the security of the United States and to our allies and partners.
And this recent attack by China, the cyber attack on the US telecom situation that Mark Warner was announcing, is part of that we're going to have to just continually invest. And part of our delegations here, one of our quests is to continue to push NATO countries to invest in defense, and that is certainly in a big way going to include cyber defense.
We did not rehearse this.
We did not. We did not, and we've taken this away from the moderator now.
Hey, that's fine. You're making my job easy. I do want to talk some more about cyber, though, because obviously, yeah, those sorts of attacks, they're insidious. They lay inside of systems. Dominic, I know that you're often talking to governments about how they can protect their AI systems from cyber attacks. I mean, these are black boxes. How do we even know when somebody's inside of them?
Yeah, one of the things, too, I wanted to emphasize is we really, truly believe in one of our strengths and one of our values as a society, as a global society, is in diversity. And one of the things that's really elemental about our diversity is that it's a wide variety of opinions and data. When you look at the pantheon of data that's been created, matter of fact, I was looking this up. 10 years ago, the world passed a major milestone, that the amount of data available online 10 years ago surpassed 1 trillion gigabytes. Now that we have to invent a new word for that, the zettabyte. Today, we create that amount of information every 2 weeks. And the only way to synthesize and understand that information is to deploy technology to be able to pull out and understand the themes and elements in that vast sea of data. And as we get to the element of cyber, like you were saying, is the threat vectors are coming from all over. And so when we talk to people about as they deploy AI systems, what are the important elements to protect? You want to protect the integrity of the AI model. And so that means having an environment where you can deploy an AI model and feel like it is secure and understand that that model itself, as you use it, is guarded by our best anti-cyber technologies, our best digital defense. We want to make sure that as that model is operating in a secure way, you have a way to verify that it hasn't been tampered with. You have digital signatures to say the model itself has the weights it was when we first deployed it. And then you also want to ensure that as you're asking questions of the model, are those questions being tampered on the way in? Is the model being instructed to interpret a question in a certain way? And so guarding against what in the past we would call this web injection today, where you protect a normal website from injecting data, you want to make sure that as you deploy an AI model, you have protections against injecting data on the question. And then subsequently, when the AI model produces an answer or an output, I want to make sure that output is also protected. And so I've guarded against the output not being tampered with on the way out. What did the model say, and is that being something that I can rely upon? And then finally, what we're starting to see with more mature deployments is there's this idea at first that there's just one AI model, and that's not the case. I mentioned that our power is in diversity. And one wonderful thing about digital technology is I can produce those variants of diversity in the AI space as well. The Admiral mentioned not relying on a single decision from an AI model influencing a decision being made. Today, when I look around the room, I ask for opinions from multiple people. I have a team that disagrees with me, that gives me multiple points of view. And so another way that we've seen more mature folks thinking about this is I'm going to deploy different AI models and ask them to red team my decision, to give me different points of view, so that the human who's making a decision has access to all of that collective wisdom, but also different views and perspectives so they can make their own value judgment call based on the human decision, the human value. So it still remains the case that the human has to stay at that point of evaluating the quality of the decision, but the cyber element is ensuring that the quality of the data stays, it maintains integrity on the way in, the model remains its integrity, and then the output maintains integrity as well.
I want to move to some of the warfare areas where we're seeing AI used right now. I'm thinking about Ukraine. We've got AI-enabled drones going out to, evade signals collection. I'm wondering, Admiral, what do you see in terms of what we can learn from what's being used on the battlefield right now in Ukraine or elsewhere?
Well, the areas are targeting and sustainment. Mm-hmm. Targeting is what can I do to what, using what, in order to achieve a particular effect. I'm sorry about my voice, ladies and gentlemen. And so you could think about it as an optimization problem, is how to quickly determine if you've got a particular target, and here on a particular target is that you have multiple platforms at multiple distances, and you have weapons, and then you've got distances, and you have the effects of those weapons, and for the target, you have all manner of inputs that are telling you where that target is. And all of these calculations are calculations that a human being would take hours or days to make, and a machine can make them really, really super rapidly. And that's an example how a machine can make that decision, really, really faster than a human being could. And this is really just the essence of what artificial intelligence is, which is it's a machine that's doing human tasks faster than a human being would. And extending that into sustainment, it's the same application, which is predicting the rate at which a human being, predicting the rate at which a unit would need a certain class of supply and the place at which it would need a supply, and pushing logistics to a time and place when the unit would need it and thus effecting that function more efficiently and preventing waste and doing it more effectively. And then in the conditions of combat, presumably doing so if we are doing it in a contested environment, to be able to do it, in the case of fires. So these are the kinds of functions that we would be performing, and it's the use of mass data analytics to do so, and so that is using geographic imaging, using geography, using signals intelligence, using optics in order to find these targets.
You know, as you talk about the different applications, I have a question that maybe I'd like to get everybody's quick answer to, which is, you know, what is the crisis right now as AI and what it can do has changed that you feel like we're best poised to try to address with artificial intelligence?
I'll give you two answers to that. The first one is, as the admirals mentioned, the large amount of data I have to synthesize to make a decision is overwhelming. That is becoming a crisis. The amount of data that someone's going to be subject to so they can make a quick decision is going to be something that you need AI to help distill, provide options so you can make a decision, number one. And number two is something the senator said as well. How do I trust that data? What's the provenance? How do I certify and verify and validate that that data is accurate so that I know I can rely upon it so I can make a decision? So they intersect. This idea that we are using AI to distill a large amount of data, but also trust the data the AI tells us is both the crisis that we need to address, and it's super important.
Mm-hmm. I'd say it's just paralysis in general. If we are going to let our politics, especially if we have a case where a number of those involved in this actually want to see some rules in place, why don't we just move on that instead of playing politics when it comes to getting this done? And again, I want our democracies in the lead of setting some things. I do see, when I look at another just crisis, if we don't get at it, an existing crisis out there is just healthcare and how we're going to afford it and how we're going to figure things out, and we're going to hurt ourselves in terms of using it if we don't have things in place. And the last thing I'd mention, seeing one of our great women officers up there from the Space Force from Minnesota, is just our human crisis of having, as we look at the changing warfare, and we look at who we're going to need to implement AI in the right way at every level. We need, as democracies, to really get people to go into these areas, and we've been all trying to do it, where they're going to be able to use these skills, whether it is in military, or whether it is in healthcare, or whether it is beyond. And just having a national effort right now to get people into STEM and get them going in this direction. We've been doing a lot on it. I think would make a major difference and is a huge advantage because of our education systems and our excitement and our robotics competitions. I was in a traffic jam going to the University of Minnesota one day, and they always put up like Gophers game. For those of you not from the US, the name of my college team is the Gophers. It is a rodent. And I thought it's usually like a sports event of why there's a traffic jam, and they have it up on a thing so you're driving so you know how long it's going to last. My best day ever it said, watch out, traffic jam, robotics competition. And so just the more we can have that be the reason for the traffic jams, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, I approach AI just strictly from the viewpoint of opportunity and embracing it. And I'm really excited to adopt it. I have the same viewpoint. I'm impatient to break down the stovepipes of data, to take all of the stovepipes of data, to put them in commonly employable plenums, to be able to employ that, to be able to employ it responsibly with the right policy, and to be able to use it effectively, to be able to use it as a discerning tool to execute warfare under the laws of armed conflict to achieve objectives as efficiently and humanely as I possibly can to deter conflict, to perform other military tasks effectively, such as humanitarian assistance, disaster relief. I don't view that there's any crisis, but I am absolutely eager to outpace our would-be adversaries to deter conflict.
You know, and as we're talking about how we operate in conflict, I wanted to go back to something you were saying, Admiral, about, you know, the need to have the human factor in there. Obviously, that is also fallible. You know, we certainly in Gaza have had airstrikes. You know, Israel is a very AI-enabled, you know, system there, that a lot of decisions are being made very quickly because data is available, and it's available very quickly. How do you change how the human decision-making process adjusts to that?
My belief, I'm so sorry, can I drink your water?
Go for it.
Just don't drink that then.
It's fine.
Keep it separate.
I don't know if it's gonna do it. I mean, this is where, this is where I think that AI is going to be helpful to us, because I think it's going to improve decision-making. I think that maintaining human accountability over the decision-making is going to improve it, but maintaining that human layer over top of it, that there's human accountability over top of it, is going to aid us. It's going to make us more discerning. You know, the laws of armed conflict still apply. You know, the 5 things in the just law theory still apply to warfare. And so that you're decreasing the amount of collateral damage when you're affecting targeting. All of those things, this is what I'm after with AI, so that you're more discerning, so that your weapons are more accurate, so that you are more discerning in finding precisely where your target is, so that you're striking fewer targets in order to achieve your effect. And all warfare is inherently human. The nature of warfare doesn't change, the character does. All warfare seeks to change political behavior, and political behavior is inherently human. It'll never be perfect. But you know, in the end, we're seeking a better outcome. And this is why I'm so hopeful and eager to employ it. But the dialectic of this is why I'm so adamant that we never abdicate the morality of it to just the machine itself.
In just a minute, I'm going to want to go to questions, so start thinking of those. But first, Senator Klobuchar, I have a question you probably expect coming your way, which is now that President Trump has been reelected, Kent Walker gave his take on what he expects from the Trump administration regarding AI. I'm wondering, as we talk about the need to balance and risks and rewards, how do you think the Trump administration will approach this?
Well, first of all, you heard Kent talk about that there was an AI order back then, and hopefully they can combine these orders in some way, because we really, when I said we don't have time to mess around with who did what, there's some common consensus among Democrats and Republicans, at least in the Senate, that spent excruciatingly long hours and hours and hours, right, Mike, listening to stakeholders from all over the place to get some ideas. And I hope they will listen to the Republicans that were involved in that, so that, and the administration will, so that we can move forward quickly and not just be another year of paralysis on this front. Then, as I mentioned, there's like 10 bipartisan pieces of legislation that have gone through that we just need to get done. And, you know, they can own it, that's fine, but we need to start getting these standards set and going forward with it. It's so far, and my friends will, I think, back me up on this, it hasn't been that partisan on some of the AI. Maybe it will be once we get to that moment, but there hasn't been as much kind of disruption, bomb throwing, and how we treat each other on this. So I just think we need to seize on it and move forward. I think on competition policy, as was also pointed out, a lot of these suits, as you mentioned, and this is outside of AI, but it will be related to it, started during the Trump administration, continued on through the Biden administration, and I do think that we have a problem of self-preferencing and other things with some of these platforms, so I hope they'll continue that on. Outside of tech, things like Ticketmaster, your Hong Kong activist who was sitting in this chair earlier, he came up to me and he just wanted to talk about Ticketmaster. I don't know if he's out there. And the Taylor Swift concert. There are some major monopoly issues. And in the past, the Macon Delrahim, who ran Justice Antitrust under Trump, did take on some of these, and J.D. Vance is devoted to some of this. And so I think you'll see some movement on that front. But I just don't think we have time when it comes to AI and some of the security issues that we've talked about to mess around on this front. So I'm hopeful we can keep this in a positive way going forward so we put things in place. Obviously, Elon Musk is, big breaking news, has the president's ear. And so, you know, that will be a factor here. And I hope that he continues on that bent earlier of saying that we need some rules and regulations in place. He appeared before the bipartisan group and gave constructive comments. This is, you know, a year ago or so. So that I hope we can move forward on this front.
Okay, well, let's go for questions. Please do, when you ask a question, stand up and introduce yourself. Let's start right here.
Hello, my name is Daria Kaleniuk. I'm from Ukraine. In the Ukrainian battlefield, there is a race now between Russian armed forces and Ukrainian armed forces about creation of AI-powered, artificial intelligence-powered swarm of drones. And we receive information that Russians already successfully tested. They just need to scale up. And honestly, Russians, they don't care who at the end makes the decision, the AI or some Russian soldier. And once they scale up and there will be swarm of drones operating in the Ukrainian battlefield, we will be in significant, you know, lower position. So, and it's important now for Ukraine to unite efforts with all the defense industries across the world to win that race so that Ukraine is faster in AI-powered swarm of drones technologies. And the question here is, what if Russians really are successfully testing these AI-powered swarm drones in Ukraine and then suddenly decide to send AI-powered swarm of drones our power plant in Narva in Estonia? What will be the response of NATO? What will be the response of collective West? Will there be response with the AI-powered some swarm of drones from Western countries? And where will be these limitations? Who makes the final decision about the shooting the enemy and killing the enemy? Thank you.
I believe that's
you
for
are
the
yours. No toss to me on this one.
Yeah. Same.
And I mean, the essence, I'm so sorry. The essence of the question is that we are in constant generations of overmatch with our adversaries or our would-be adversaries, and we must constantly respond to the threats. And in fact, we are responding to those threats right now. And I do take the point that we are currently embroiled in a race with the Russians, with the PRC, with Iran, with North Korea. We had that panel this morning. I take constructively the point that you're making, ma'am. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, over there.
Thank you, Heidi. My name is Josh Rogan. I'm a columnist with the Washington Post. Thank you.
Heard of you? Yeah.
My question is for our panelists from AWS. There's been a gold rush of U.S. tech companies, AI, but not just AI companies, to form partnerships to build cloud and AI and data infrastructure in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. AWS has announced $5.3 billion for a new cloud and data hub in that kingdom. And as human rights groups have pointed out, that presents clear risks based on that regime's serial human rights abuses, entrenched digital authoritarianism, invasive surveillance, and long record of abusing data held in its possession to repress not only Saudi Arabians, but people all around the world, including here in Canada. And I'm wondering if you can help us on, this is a human rights conference. This is a grouping of democracies. There's no Saudi officials here for a reason. Not because they're not nice people, but because this is a conference based on certain values. And I'm wondering how does AWS view that risk? What due diligence have you done to ensure that the data of Saudi Arabians or anyone who's held in this new system won't be used for nefarious purposes despite that long record? And what kind of transparency are you willing to offer so that the rest of us can be assured that we're not actually handing up more power to people who are certain to abuse it? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I understand the question and the concern. I want to point out for consistency, we have an acceptable use policy that guides and governs what is allowable on our platforms and infrastructure, no matter where it's deployed anywhere in the world. For the actual aspects of what our public policy is, I'm going to refer to our public policy folks on this. I'm just the technologist guy, so I implement and deploy technology. So really, I think going beyond that is something I'll refer for later.
Hi, right here.
Steve Sang from SOAS, School of Oriental African Studies in London. The question is probably really directed to the Admiral. It was very reassuring to hear you say about the guardrails that were put in place in the use of AI for the military. A realistic but hypothetical situation would be that in a confrontation with a near peer like China, they will not be following the same kind of rules of guardrails if things were not going well for them. Are there circumstances that the Americans will also lift the guardrails to respond, and what would be the kind of circumstances, criteria that would cause a thing on that situation? Or is it something you completely rule out?
No, I cannot envision the United States of America abdicating the decision to offensively take lives to a machine. I cannot envision that. Now, if you're talking about guardrails with the nuclear deterrent, I think that's a completely separate matter for a separate discussion. And in fact, that is an entirely separate matter in a separate space that has been discussed in the public space between the president and between the two presidents at Woodside and on other places. So I think at its very best right now, where AI is right now, I don't see it as a doomsday machine like you're discussing right now. And that these guardrails are going to somehow confer this giant advantage, like you're discussing, from one to the other. What you're talking about is a departure from the laws of armed conflict, and that would be that's the guardrail that we're talking about. And a departure from the laws of armed conflict is proportionality. That is protection of the lives of innocents. That strikes against medical personnel. These are laws of armed conflict violations. These are the considerations that an AI tool may or may not have at its disposal. That's what we're talking about how you'd want to have human accountability that is overlaid on top of a tool that's advising a commander based on the decisions that a commander is making, either at the strategic level or here at the tactical level. So, I don't see that as being, in the near future, a viable situation, just as in the previous panel where we're talking about where AI is right now. I don't see it as being at that level in the near future. And at the strategic level with nuclear weapons, I think this is the stuff of treaties. And at the national level, our two countries are having the PRC. I know you're in Great Britain, but the two countries are having discussions.
We've got time for one more question. Oh, here we go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tavia, and I'm from Jamaica. I'm honored to be one of the 15 at 15 winners, and I'm curious to know, how can young people actively contribute to shaping the future of AI in a way that creates a safer and more secure world? Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'd say you've started by being here and being through listening to all this and going out there and talking about it to your peers. I also mentioned going into careers involving AI in some way, especially in the government, where we dearly need people that have that kind of expertise. And the one thing I've been waiting to say is just that all of this that we've talked about with guardrails and international treaties, all of this, it's not going to happen if people aren't able to make good decisions in their democracy. I'm kind of back to where I started from, that we have to protect our democracies by making sure, as you know, your generation, it's all online. That's how they're getting their information. I am personally obsessed with news and making sure that our news organizations continue to thrive, which is not easy in today's world. Complex, but there's ways that we can make sure they are compensated for their content that they are producing, because right now some of it gets ripped off. Australia, Canada's done something on this, and it's very hard to be able to locate news if you're just scrolling through and getting things that aren't real. And that ecosystem has to be protected for democracy to thrive. But mostly it is on all of us, regardless of the political advantage of one party or not, to start doing something about these deepfakes, which I think we're just seeing the cusp of in a democracy. Because if the whole Halifax idea of combining the security ideas, which is always probably the most sexy to talk about, it's going to all fail us if we don't have citizens that understand what they're facing and the choices they're facing. And to do that, we have to have a strong democracy. And to do that, we have to allow people to see the truth.
On that note, thank you so much for this discussion. I think we've all got a coffee break coming up, so we can continue this one out in the hall.
Okay.